We're 2/3 of the way through the baseball season, and look, there's still plenty of time for your first-place teams to fall apart. No doubt. I've lost some leads in mid-September, painfully.
Me too. Last year.
Okay,
not that I remember anything.
And I'm not talking about a 1-point lead. I've lost 20-point leads in September, but so that can happen. If you're in 5th place or 4th place, you can still make that run, and I think you should still be really on it. Make trades, do what you have to do. But if you're in 7th or 8th or 9th in August, it's pretty much over. And that means it's time to kind of assess, what did you do wrong? How did you get yourself in this embarrassing state? And to take stock. I mean, it's over. I'm not saying you shouldn't try for 5th or 4th or 3rd. You should. But you also can start looking at, okay, where did I go wrong? So I kind of have an idea of what happened to some of my teams that aren't doing well. But I'm going to pose the question to you first. Where did you err in March when you were drafting?
Usually, it's with batting average. That's the consistent trend throughout my non-competitive teams. I'm having a good year, but there's a couple teams that are real stinkers. And the worst one's my NFBC team, my main event team. It's a nightmare team. It's horrible. It's embarrassing. I hate it. You look at the team though. B.J. Upton, Danny Espinosa was a draft pick. I have picks like that throughout. I bet on the come a little too much with some young guys like Jed Jerko and Jerkson Profar. And maybe I bought into last year into the young guy thing a little too much too. But it's just consistently, it's just depressing. You see that 4 for 41 night with 0 homers and 2 RBI and 1 run scored, and then you see everybody else going crazy. It's just so depressing. Nothing's worse than a team that can't hit. It's just the worst type of team to own.
Yeah, it's unpleasant, and I know the feeling. Now, my NL Tout team, I had great pitching. I felt like I got Shelby Miller for $6, Hyun-Jin Ryu for $6. I got Strasburg, I paid a lot for, but still, he's been fine. I had Samardzija, who I traded. I picked up Cingrani and Jose Fernandez. It's a great NL pitching staff. Got a little unlucky with wins, but the real problem I had was hitting. And the problem really wasn't some of the gambles I made. Those have been fine. It was betting on, paying first-round dollars for Bryce Harper, Giancarlo Stanton. Combined, they have 69 RBIs, and that's just not cutting it for whatever the $75 or whatever I spent on them, $70 I spent on them. And, I wrote about this in Charging Them Out a little bit, and I think that, young players, Bryce Harper's 20, Stanton's 23, they're pre-peak. And why do we worry about young players? Well, we know well the career arcs of the average major leaguer. Usually they get better until they're about 26 through 28 when they peak, and then they slowly decline into their mid-30s when they fall off the mat and retire. Now, there are exceptions. There's guys who start, really well at age 20 or 21, and there's guys who make it till 40. But for the most part, this career arc for hitters is pretty accurate. There's obviously some fits and starts in there. But I think that where I kind of went wrong is there was no doubt about the skills of Harper based on what he did last year in his pedigree. And there's no doubt about Stanton's skills, I think he led the majors in slugging last year. But I think that's not why the career arc, or that's not the only reason why the career arc for major leaguers is what it is. I think a lot of it is health. And both of those guys got hurt or playing through nagging injuries in case of Harper. I think they get hurt because they don't know what the hell they're doing. They don't know how to pace themselves. They run into walls. They sprint down the line for a last-place team to break up a double play and tear their hamstrings. They don't understand sort of the pacing. Maybe they work too hard in batting practice to show off. Who knows? But when these guys have a few more years in the majors or they get a little bit older, they learn to sort of pace themselves, and yet they're still young enough when you're 26, 27 that your body heals quickly, but you're also wise enough that you don't put it through things that are going to make it more likely to get hurt. So I think sometimes the whole thing with young players is not that they're not ready to perform, it's they don't know what the hell they're doing health-wise and staying healthy throughout the season.
That's right. And Jason Hayward is definitely a guy that fits in that too. But you do have to ask yourself, what is Mike Trout doing right that Bryce Harper's doing wrong? Right. What's Manny Machado? I mean, he's slumping a little bit, but he stayed healthy. What is he doing right that these guys are doing wrong? So you got to be careful not to do a be-all, end-all. But, I guess it's kind of maybe sometimes you have your eggs in one basket with all these emergent young star group. Well, sometimes that they're not going to emerge like that too. I'll tell you one other mistake I made, and I agree with your theory, by the way, first of all. I think there's something to that there. I think there's definitely something about learning how to become a major league hitter. Being a major league player, dealing with the grind. It is a grind of a baseball season. And you don't have amphetamines anymore to help you get through that either.
I mean, or steroids.
I mean, we get through the day here at RotoWIre with all the Ritalin we can use, but, it's still a little bit different. I think that the other thing, I made one mistake. I want to dispose of he has a contract, he's going to hold the closer job theory. I got burned by that pretty bad in labor this year. J.J. Putt's got that big contract extension. Brandon League signed that ridiculous contract. Those were my two closers coming out of labor. I'm in 4th place, 5th place every day in that league. But man, if I had, my pitching got hosed pretty much all the way around. I've got, I'm at a point now where I think I'm 8 starters and 1 non-closing reliever, and so I'm gaining wins and Ks. But man, my ratios are crap to begin with because of Roy Halladay, and I don't have saves because of those 2 guys. If I had just gone non-starters, I would have been much better off than just paying full price for those flawed closers that had the contract. So I thought they had the security. Heath Bell last year. I think this is a different era. Teams are more willing to eat that contract now.
Well, we talked about this a little bit on the air today. If the Phillies get that TV deal, then maybe they're going to be rich like the Dodgers, and they're not going to be no one's going to care as much about contracts unless the contracts get, eventually that money gets passed down to the players, and of course the cost gets passed down to the fans. But cross that bridge if there's enough fans that can even afford to go to a game anymore. But the point is, until it gets passed on to the players, and they're worried about these contracts, as long as the TV deal is a lot bigger than, as long as the player salaries become negligible, then, the fact they gave a guy a 3-year deal to close might not matter. But I do think it does matter. Heath Bell last year was actually a point for the argument that you buy into the contract. The fact is Heath Bell got about 9 or 10 blown saves.
That's true. That's a good point. I'll buy that.
The guy without the contract's done in 2 or 3 at most.
Yeah.
So, it just so happens that you can blow any kind of closer job. And I think Brandon League wasn't as much as Heath Bell, but he was almost as bad. He blew about 4 or 5 chances. He got a lot of chances. If he didn't have that contract, he would have been pulled much sooner. So the question isn't, you can't blindly take a closer just because he has a contract. Because if he's so terrible, he's going to blow 5 or 6 in a row. Well, there's nothing a contract can do to save him. But think about Kevin Gregg. I mean, Kevin Gregg was one of the worst closers in the last few years, and he's been fine without a contract. So
yeah.
If you can
and the other thing about league is, 2 things also. The Dodgers, they have to win now, and they had the money to try to fix problems. 2, they had a very viable alternative in Kenley Jansen, too.
Right.
Whereas the Diamondbacks, they fiddled around with Heath Bell, and David Hernandez is having a terrible year, and they've landed on Brad Ziegler, who is a good, solid relief pitcher, but he's not your typical closer. He's a ground ball artist, and he doesn't have a huge contract at all. But they've landed on him to be the closer for now, and it's just interesting to see how this evolves sometimes. And I don't know, it's just one of those things that I wish I could turn back the clock and tell March Jeff, don't do that, they're bad pitchers, don't do that.
Right, I think it's true. Like, I think a bad pitcher, okay, but look, Kevin Gregg is a bad pitcher, but he's doing well this year. I think a bad pitcher can close. He needs to get a little lucky. If you have the contract, you get more chances to get lucky. But if you're just going to be bad over and over, nothing's going to save you. So I think that kind of happened. I do think it's an advantage. I don't think it's a saving grace. It's not going to save you if you can't save yourself. The other thing I want to talk about is older players, and I think you talked about amphetamines. I think the younger guys, they're a little ADD, especially in this day and age. Everybody seems to be diagnosed with it. Maybe they need, they can't focus over the long season. They get spaced out. They hurt themselves. They do stuff carelessly. But the older guys who know how to play baseball and they've been around, they need the steroids because they need to heal faster. And so now the steroids are being removed. So those old guys start breaking down. I have Paul Konerko in a league. Maybe that was a mistake. And I think now that they've, ostensibly cleaned up baseball, maybe you really have to pay top dollar for those 26 to 28-year-olds, the guys who are smart enough to know how to take care of themselves and still young enough to endure, to heal quickly and not get hurt that much. So it's the Andrew McCutcheons, Chris Davis, Adam Jones. There's a couple, Carlos Gomez is having a monster year. These guys are all in that sweet spot. Troy Tulowitzki's 28. He got hurt, but still, even so, he's been worth it. Even with missing, 5 weeks or whatever he missed. So
same with Carlos Gonzalez too.
Carlos Gonzalez, 27 years old, right in that sweet spot. So, I think maybe, whereas I'm playing a game from 3 years ago where, young guys, maybe can get in, maybe they're cheaper than they should be, or the old guys, they keep hitting, at a late age. But now that, baseball's cleaned up a little bit, maybe those guys, it's tough, and they're really going to kind of conform more to that career arc. Now, look, if you got, as we said, Mike Trout and Gene Segura, that's great. And maybe Trout plays with sort of the wisdom of a 25 or 26-year-old. Maybe he's a little bit more, has his head on straight. I mean, Bryce Harper is kind of an idiot. Bryce Harper is 75% as much of an idiot as I was at age 20. Okay, and he's 20.
At age 40, what?
At age 40, yeah. I'm going to say he's more of an idiot than I am now, but people might disagree with me. But he's certainly almost as much of an idiot as I was at age 20, and I was an idiot. Right, but he has the added problem of having to play, of being like, a big celebrity and playing in front of big crowds and having to conduct himself. I mean, of course he's going to do stupid stuff. So, that's a real risk when you invest top dollar in those guys. And sometimes they're kind of poised like Trout, and they just kind of instinctively know how to handle it. And I think, Bryce Harper's just a bigger injury risk. He's not like a bad guy. He's not going to get arrested or anything probably. He's just, a little goofy. And I think, he's not as much of a pro as someone like Andrew McCutchen, who's 26 years old.
Where are you drafting Bryce Harper next year?
Oh, super high. Probably, look, but I am going to, look, and I don't buy the argument that I can't draft 3 different young guys. They're not like some sector that rises and falls together. They're all independent, right? But, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to pay in an auction. I think I'll be pretty high on him because I think that skill is so high. But I do think, in the sense that you really want to have a little bit of safety early and gamble more late, that he's, he could hit 60 homers next year. I mean, I really think he could do something crazy like that. But, he could also get hurt or just be good for stretches. And it's just hard to know where he's at professionally, whereas, like, he's just such kind of a hot shot. I don't know. It's just, it's fun to root for the guy. It's fun to have him on your team. But, when you're rather just like a steady Eddie, like a McCutchen, that you just kind of feel like, and I was the guy criticizing McCutchen as sort of a low upside guy who's going to do okay. But in the end, like, he's just steady, and he's going to get you stuff across the board, and you don't really have to worry about him too much.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I will say one thing. I want to make sure that we're not going too micro here. It might be a case there where you had the right plan but just the wrong guys. The converse, the Gene McCaffrey argument there. Right. Or not converse, that's not the right word, but
the inverse.
The inverse. Yeah. I mean, maybe you had the right idea, just these guys didn't happen to work out. And maybe there was an effective counter argument against Stanton, team-oriented about the RBI total that we're talking about here. I don't think that's completely it, but I think that's part of it. So you want to make sure that you don't overconclude on the basis of one season, on the basis of your sample of the players you took, especially because you tend to repeat your players a lot. You tend to get the same guys a lot.
Right. I mean, I really this year, with 5 teams with Stanton, 4 with Harper and Morneau's been very mediocre, although he's got about
Hey, homer today!
He's got 9 homers. I mean, he's going to pay for 15 homers and like 80, 90 RBIs. It's not like where I got him, he's really going to kill me. His average is like 270. But, he certainly is not making a big profit where I got him either. So, look, that wasn't really the big deal. It's really Harper and Stanton who I had to pay top dollar to get, or first and second round picks. And I think that you're right. I don't want to over extrapolate from one thing, but the reason I cite this as maybe where I went wrong is because I have a reason behind it. I'm not just saying, oh, these guys got hurt, look how unlucky I am. I'm thinking, well, maybe they were a better bet to get hurt because they don't know what they're doing yet. Maybe next year they'll know what they're doing a little better, but and maybe there's guys like Manny Machado who's real quiet, goes about his business. They're kind of like Trout, they're pros from the beginning. Or maybe I'm just retroactively making these things up because I see that they haven't gotten hurt yet, so it seems plausible to say that now. I don't know. But I do think when we look for a trend like this, or we look for where we went wrong, if it's just, oh, these guys got hurt, that sucks, it's bad luck, okay, you could conclude that. But if you think there's a cause, and it does just seem like those guys, Harper didn't just get hurt crashing into the wall. He just kind of ignored an injury and was playing through it. And maybe if he'd just taken 4 days off right after that, not just the wall, but he had a previous injury from diving after a ball, maybe he wouldn't have had to go on the DL for a month. So I feel like as the guys get older and wiser, they just do the right thing and know how to take care of themselves, and that doesn't happen.
Do you think the Nats are going through the what went wrong process right now, or are they going to wait to the end of the season?
Yes, I think Davey Johnson was also kind of an idiot the way he was handling it. I mean, he was kind of encouraging Harper, to be dumb.
Yeah.
And, that's, to me, like, that was bad too. Maybe if he had a better manager who was more in touch, they would have sat him down right away and been more communicative about how hurt he was.
Yeah, that's possible too. Plus, they fired their hitting instructor. Maybe that was part of their what went wrong analysis. Yeah, they're not scoring a lot of runs. Maybe they're just trying to change it up. But the thing is are they just going to look back and say, well, it's injuries that held us back? Or is it going to be like, did we have some fundamental structure problem there too? Do we have injury-prone players? Do we have guys that just ran into bad years? That's going to. I'm interested to see how they handle the offseason. When a team has such high expectations, really ramps up this year or bust, and busts badly, I'm curious to see how the reaction is to all of that.
There's no doubt that injuries have a huge luck element to them. I mean, you can't blame it totally on. I mean, Harper was the same guy last year. Maybe he was a little more restrained because it was his rookie year. but he played 139 games in the big leagues and 21 in the minors. So he held up fine last year. So there is some luck involved no matter what. But it's not about, what actually happens. It's about who's likely to get hurt, who's likely to be more cavalier about taking care of themselves, who's likely to lose their attention span. You get hurt when you space out, when you stop paying attention to what you're doing for a second, like when you crash in the wall full speed because you're not aware of your foot touching the warning track. So, and then there's just sort of the maintenance of, when you do get hurt, how do you handle it? When you're 19 or 20, you don't really know. You haven't been hurt before. You've never had a problem. You don't really know what it takes to maintain it and how stay off of the knee that's bothering you. So, again, I'm not necessarily saying I'm not drafting those guys next year. I'm just saying if I can identify where I went wrong, it seems to me I did bet on some guys who had the skills, but maybe not sort of the mental wherewithal to play baseball for 160 games, and that with a little bit of bad luck, really cost me.
Yeah, and I always find this a useful exercise to analyze where we went wrong, and it's good to do that too. I think we always like to analyze, hey, where did we get it right? Let's brag about ourselves. Let's figure out, hey, we've got this magic formula. I think it's more valuable to figure out where we went wrong, but I think that's a whole nother discussion for another day too.
Yeah, I mean, you only get better for when you look at where you did wrong. When you figure out what you did right, it's kind of like, okay, let's pat myself on the back. Say one other area I went wrong, and we'll bring this to a close, is I bet on Halladay in a couple of leagues early. Obviously, when his velocity went down 10 minutes after I drafted him in Yahoo Friends and Family. After that, I didn't take him anywhere, and I didn't even bid on him in tout for like 14, 15, whatever he went. I wasn't really in on that to the end. CC Sabathia I had in 3 teams, has been kind of a bust, and I really thought he was going to be fine. I was a little concerned about the velocity, but he had lower velocity last year and he was totally fine. Maybe he's had some bad luck, but I think he's just not. He's still got the strikeout to walk ratio. I just think he's not. When they're getting the bat on, they're getting on a lot harder, giving up more home runs and more hits. And so I bet on a few too many of those veteran pitchers to be okay, with diminished velocity or coming off some minor injuries, like it seemed like Halladay and CC Sabathia were.
Yeah, I could see that happening too. The funny thing is, until you and I had a conversation about Halladay in Arizona, I was convinced to stay away. However, I still made the choice to buy him there. But it is true. And I think the other thing is, if you've put in the time and you've done all the research, follow your own gut first. Don't look to blame others. Don't look to glom on other people's.
Are you restraining yourself from blaming me now for the Halladay pick?
No, it's still not. It's not your fault. It's my fault. It's definitely my fault. I'm the one that said 20. I'm the one that said 18. I'm the one that said 20. So hey, it's blame me.
Right.
But the thing is, if you've got that nagging feeling that this is wrong, listen to it. It's your instinct is almost 100 is going to be more right than someone trying to persuade you otherwise. If you put in the time, if you've done all the research on these players, the players to begin with, don't go self-doubting yourself.
Well, I'll leave with this one very disturbing thought. In NFFC, I really love my draft, but I picked 6th overall, and it was the only pick that I had any hesitation on, and Spiller was by far the top guy on my board where I drafted, but all of a sudden I had this really strong Trent Richardson gut feel, and I nearly took him, but I said, I have Spiller ranked. I'm not going to switch this at the last second. I'm just going to go Spiller. We'll see how that goes. But